Welcome to the Homegrown podcast, the place where we share the truth about food and farming from our kitchen to yours. I'm your host, Liz Hazelmeyer, along with my husband, Joey.
Good afternoon.
And together we hope to educate, inspire, and equip you in your pursuit of true nourishment. Today's guest is Adam Lane Smith. Adam is an attachment specialist. Drawing from his wealth of clinical experience and personal insight, Adam offers a unique perspective on the essential role of attachment in our lives. Adam, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
We are very excited to have this interesting and I would say unique conversation on our podcast. We have a lot of parents in our audience, but I know that attachment affects everyone. So before we dive into that, I'd love to know how you got into this line of work.
So I became the attachment specialist it's been a long road, let's just say. I was a licensed marriage and family therapist for many, many years. But before that, I was a young man and a young child who had his own attachment issues. I grew up in one of the worst cities in the United States. It's been routinely voted the most miserable city. It's also one of the carjacking capitals of the U.S., one of the meth capitals of the U.S. So I grew up in an environment where all the other kids around me were also very, very unhappy, and they had attachment issues. They had family challenges, insecurities. So I was the one that everybody came to try to feel better. If one of the other kids in the area was miserable and depressed and unhappy and couldn't talk to anyone about it, they came to Adam. Or they sent them to Adam. So by the time I was about 20, I had enough of my own issues, and I said, I need to fix this. I need to figure out how to get through this. I punched through my own attachment issues. It was an awful experience doing it alone, and it convinced me that I wanted to help other people do it not alone so that they could get through it. I knew I'd found something important. I went to school, got my master's degree in psychology. That was 6 years, did another 3 years of apprenticeship under 5 different clinicians with 4 different licensure types so that I could really span the range of the field of psychology. And after that, I started working in the field. I worked in low-income clinics for families who couldn't even afford therapy. So the county would pay us a pittance of what a therapist would usually make. The people would come in free of charge for them so that the families could get help, and I would work with them. I wrote a book over my shoulder called Slaying Your Fear about attachment theory. It's a 100-page book. I'd print out little copies. I would hand them to my clients who couldn't even afford to buy a book. And I'd say, please read this. This is what's underlying your diagnoses. This is what's causing your family to fall apart. This is what has ruined so much of your relationships so far. And this is what we're going to be doing to help you get better. So I met a wonderful, wonderful group of friends who run digital media brands. And they said, we want to take you much bigger than where you're at. Can we pull you out of this clinic? Can we do some bigger work? And I said, absolutely. So we started working on the big stage. Now I've got 500,000 followers, actually more than that now. I've got my own podcast. I am the attachment specialist. I get to work with people all over the world to improve their families and their relationships. And it has been a wild ride, but it's been an honor being able to help people so much.
Wow, what a beautiful story. Thank you for sharing that.
I want to kind of drop a pin on part of your story, if you don't mind.
Mhm.
You mentioned at a point in your age that you punched through your attachment issues. Did you identify them as attachment issues then?
I had no idea.
And
I had no idea. I just knew that I was insecure. I had an inferiority complex. It was hard for me to ask other people for what I needed. I felt like I was never going to make things work in relationships, and it was all my fault.
Mm.
I felt like I could not be forward with my boundaries or goals or anything. I had to just make other people happy. And I had what I would learn to identify as anxious attachment style back then, but I just knew it was crushing me to death, and I could not live that way anymore because I wanted to live true to my principles. I wanted to live true to what I knew was right and wrong, and to do what was right more consistently. So I just made myself go through. I made myself follow the steps that I've outlined in my book there, Slaying Your Fear. I made myself do it, and it was such an awful experience doing it all on my own without any answers. That was what drove me to want to create a method for other people to do it much faster, much easier.
Yeah. Let's get into, to kind of set the framework for this conversation, what is attachment theory and what are those different styles of attachment?
Well, that answer, I'm going to tailor this answer. You know your audience better than I do. Hello, audience at home. Who are we speaking to primarily? Who's the biggest demographics out there?
I'm going to say people like us, parents, and well, we have a lot of, I don't know, how would you answer that?
I think the best way demographically I would speak to this would be young parents, moms, but there's also going to be some older generation folks that are in here. People that are looking to live life differently, that are aspiring for better health, that are willing to steer into the fray, into an idea or a practice that might not be kind of the commercialized approach, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
That would kind of be some of the kind of what would you call this, like basic demographics, and then maybe some behavioral characteristics that I would identify.
Now, this right here is a demonstration of what we would call secure attachment, where you have people coming to you and they're learning from you, and you are really seeking to understand them and understand who they are, where they're coming from, and then give them exactly what they're looking for. It's not a transactional relationship, and you're not also just, who cares who they are? It's these people with this amount of money. You didn't mention any of that in there. It was, these are their needs. This is how we're serving them. You're forming that reciprocal relationship. That is excellent. So attachment theory is the formation of healthy, generous, and loving relationships that form as collaborations, genuine collaborations between people where you care for each other's needs. That's called secure attachment. Okay. Now, attachment theory forms this idea that that's not all that we can grow in childhood, understandably, if your parents didn't teach you how to collaborate honestly, openly, calmly, with understanding, with good faith. If they didn't teach you how to go to somebody and say, hey, this is what I need. Hey, can you help me with this? Hey, here's something I'm struggling with this. Oh, I'm having this problem. I made a mistake. I'm scared. If they didn't teach you that you could do that, your brain can break in a number of ways. If you go through daycare, for example, way too early or too much daycare, if you're in the NICU as a small child, if you were abused, you might learn one of two lessons. One is that other people are not trustworthy. You can't connect with them. You can't trust them. You can't open up to them. Something is off with other people. Maybe you don't hate them. Maybe they're not bad, but they are simply not reliable, especially when they get stressed out. So you're going to close that door. You're never going to open it again. You are never going to allow an emotional intimacy. You're going to cut off many of your own feelings, and you're going to become a lot more mechanic, a lot more tactical thinking, lone wolf sort of thinking, me, and that's it. This is what we call avoidant attachment style. The other way, and mostly men get this one. So ladies at home, if your husband is a bit shut off from his emotions and all he thinks about is tactics and risk assessment and everything is like he's running a business all the time, that would be avoidant attachment style. Mm-hmm. Anxious attachment style is the opposite side. You have said something is wrong with me on the inside. I am inferior. I do not deserve love. Something is wrong and people can see it. So I have to put up a cardboard cutout and be perfect and make everybody else happy so they don't abandon me. Because if they see who I am, they will not accept me. So a lot of codependency forms. I need other people to need me. I need to connect with people who have problems. I need to find ways to get approval and to not get abandoned. Anxious attachment style is that belief that you don't deserve love. And there is about a 5% group of the population that has a blend of the two, where they've been so wounded in childhood over and over and over that one of these was not enough. They felt like it was all their fault, but then they also started to believe it must be other people too. Or they start off thinking it's primarily other people, but as the abuse or the pain or the struggle continued, they started really doubting themselves as well. Now they have a doubt for both sides, and they're not really able to have any peace in relationships. These are the fundamental blocks of keeping us apart. These are the fundamental blocks breaking down families. The research is horrible on this. It shows that about 65% of Gen Z people now have insecure attachment, with only 35% forming secure attachment. So it's a growing problem. Everybody needs to hear about it.
You mentioned in there too early or too much daycare.
Mm-hmm.
Or abuse or something happening early on. So talk to us, like, what age are we talking? Like newborn, like we're forming this attachment like from day one, and is there a window where this attachment is really getting solidified in our kids or in us as children?
Yeah, so the research on this is fascinating. There's more than 20 years of research, 30 years of research on this, especially by the Canadian government. They did extensive research on kids in daycare, the effects on long-term mental health. It's all laid out for anyone who wants to. Just go Google Canadian government daycare study. Just go look that up for yourself. But the research is not kind with research, with daycare, okay? Too much daycare, meaning that you are not getting the formation bonding with your parents that you need. You're not even interacting with them. You don't even have much chance to collaborate with them. Or mom is coming home utterly exhausted from her 2 jobs, barely is able to interact with you, then you have to go to bed. If most of your formation years are spent, those first 5-6 years are spent with other caregivers, with daycare providers, kindergartner teachers, preschool teachers, all of that, then you aren't properly bonding with your parents. And you're not really going to bond with a paid professional the way that you would with your parents. You're also looking at a turnover rate with caregivers, right? The child forms a bond with this caregiver, and then that caregiver has to leave for a variety of reasons. I have many coaching clients come into me and say, Adam, I don't understand. I had a really good couple of nannies in the first year of my life, and I don't know why I have never felt like my mom really was my mom. And I said, well, think back to some of the characteristics that you associate with like a mom who, and they start really thinking about it, and they say, oh my goodness, it's this first caregiver that was with me for 2 years, and then she left. And they say, is that why I have abandonment issues? Because she left to find a different job? Yes, typically you formed a new idea that that was your mom. I've seen that many, many times. So yes, newborns shouldn't be in daycare. Yes, it's better to put them with a family member if you absolutely must. Realities of the world exist, but we are seeing a variety of answers for that. Whether it's newborns, 4, 5, 6, it's not a good idea to separate children from their parents, especially their mom in that first 6 years of life.
Okay, the first 6 years of life. That's fascinating. It makes me also wonder, just listening to you describe those different styles of attachment, what's the easiest way to pinpoint the style you might have? Because I feel like personally, I have a hard time identifying these things in myself.
Yeah.
So is there like examples we can run through where you can kind of see, okay, if this is your leaning or your reaction, you might have this attachment style?
Yeah. Do you mind if I use you as a guinea pig for the audience
Sure,
here?
please
So they
do.
can watch?
I'd
Okay.
love to know.
All right. When you let's pretend you have a problem. Okay. Let's pretend you did something. Let's pretend you did something and you're kind of concerned to talk to Joey about it. Okay. It could be anything, or you need something. There's something very pressing and urgent that you need to talk to him about, but it's also very emotionally charged. Maybe it makes you feel a little bit nervous, the topic, whatever it might be. How likely are you to feel a big surge of anxiety and having to go to him about it? And not related to him personally, but just in general, that there's now a big topic you're going to have to go talk to somebody about.
I don't feel like I'm okay with that.
Good. Wonderful.
I'm okay to go to him. Just him,
Perfect.
though, probably.
Just him. Okay. Now that's interesting. You formed
Or
a
my
secure
parents.
attachment specifically with him. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I love that.
Would you say that's accurate?
I'll answer. If I have challenges, I can feel some anxiety about having to kind of have that hard discussion for sure.
Interesting.
I mean, so an example would be whether it be like delivering hard news at work to like, hey man, we're not hitting our numbers, talking to partners, that kind of stuff. I feel it 100%.
Very cool. Thank you. I appreciate you stepping forward. When you think about having to go deliver some hard news, do you sit there and rehearse it in your head?
Sometimes I've rehearsed.
Yeah. Do you spend some time maybe the night before not sleeping well because you're going to have to do it? Or are you distracted during the day as you're leading up to it?
I definitely think about it. Whether it keeps me awake or not is less. I'm not sure if it keeps me specifically up at night. But there's definitely times where I'm going to bed and I have thought about it for sure.
Do you carefully plan your opening words to try to set the dominoes up correctly?
Yep.
Okay.
I think I do that too.
Do you carefully plan?
That's normal.
Yeah. Do you carefully plan the first half of the conversation to try to set all of the dominoes up as many as you can?
You know what? Sometimes, but mostly it's like the first couple of words, because then once I kind of get going, I've felt in the past that's kind of what the surge that I need.
Are you afraid ever or nervous ever? Do you ever have the feeling that those people are simply going to overrun you with their emotions during the conversation, that you can't rely on them to be reasonable?
I don't think I've thought that specifically before.
Cool. Good. Do you ever worry that you're going to be exposed as a fraud during this conversation?
Often.
Okay. Do you ever feel that this conversation is going to snowball out of control and wreck the whole relationship?
In some instances, depending on what the news is. But there are some people that I have never felt that with.
Good. Okay. All of the pieces that you're talking about there with the anxiety pieces would be more in line with an anxious attachment style. The fear of, I'll be exposed, I'm an imposter, but not severe. You're actually facing it head on. You're dealing with it, which is excellent. The overthinking, though, the spending time in the days ahead, trying to plan out conversations. A lot of people with attachment issues here's a key piece, because they don't know how to collaborate with other people, they go into the conversation trying to have all of the conversation themselves and plan it all themselves. If a problem hits, they try to solve the problem themselves alone in their head and not tell the other person until the problem has already been solved. They're usually afraid to tell the other person. They want to fix it really fast and then go, not even report to the other person, just see if the other person hopefully never notices there was a problem in the first place. A lot of my coaching clients, my avoidantly attached men who come in, and they haven't really bonded properly with anybody in most of their life. There's hormones missing, but they will often say, Adam, I have a really great girlfriend, and I'm not sure how to build emotional intimacy. How can I do things from my side to build emotional intimacy without her knowing and without ever revealing any emotions in myself or my thoughts or vulnerabilities whatsoever? Now, they don't say that in those words, but that's what comes across. And they don't realize the strangeness of it either. I have to point it out and say, so do you see how you're trying to push buttons to get a result? Not horribly, you're not evil, but you're trying to push buttons to get a result without exposing any vulnerabilities because you are not collaborating with the other person. So has it ever occurred to you that you can go to her and you can say, hi, sweetheart, I really want to build emotional intimacy with you. I'm not sure what that looks like. Here's a couple ideas I have. Do you have some ideas and could we work on this together? When I tell them that, they go, and they stare, like their eyelids peel back and they like their skin crawls at the idea of thinking of pulling somebody else in and solving a problem with them. Because most people with attachment issues, they think that pulling somebody else into a problem makes the problem worse and harder to solve. Your cortisol spikes even harder. It's, I must solve this alone. That's generally speaking, that's the worst part of the attachment issue. So everybody at home, if you're listening, if you default to solving it yourself, but you're terrified, you can't sleep, you're afraid you're going to be exposed or that you're going to get overrun, pretty big indicators of attachment issues.
That's so fascinating. Adam, I got a question. Just, I mean, maybe it's more personal gain question here, but
sure,
I have maybe had the opportunity to deliver a lot of bad news in my life, whether because I make a lot of mistakes or because I'm just in a place of responsibility. And either way, I do feel like it has gotten a lot easier over the years. And I don't know how to explain it other than like when you asked me, do I rehearse the whole thing? Well, I think at one point there was a time where I would try to rehearse the entire conversation. And now it's almost like if I just know how to kind of get the conversation started, I know that everything's going to be great.
Now, did you hear a moment ago when Liz said, I don't ever feel bad about telling him, I don't ever feel scared because I can always bring him anything? That was fascinating because what you guys have built there, regardless of what you were before, attachment styles can change. You have formed a secure attachment relationship, which is perfect. That's exactly what couples need to build. That's it. Because here's the thing. You can't just go out and randomly desensitize yourself by having 100 experiences because many of them that you'll cultivate will actually be bad experiences. If you walk out there and say, I can never trust anybody, I can never talk to anybody, I'm a fraud, I can't expose myself, I have to do it all secretly and please people, then you will have 100 terrible experiences in line with what you believe. You'll screw up the good experiences and you'll maximize the bad experiences. And then you'll say, wow, that was horrible. I should just keep shutting all of my feelings down and never connect to anybody ever again, which is why people with attachment issues, they form a self-perpetuating circle instead of fixing it. But when we connect to either a securely attached person or we say that enough is enough, like I did when I was 20, like you guys have in your marriage. We say enough is enough. I'm going to say the truth. We're going to deal with the truth. And then, wow, look, it worked. The other person valued the truth and they actually care about me. And we form a positive feedback loop inside of the relationship. That is what desensitizes our fear because it releases a couple of very key brain chemicals. I can get into those if you guys want to, but that's a whole science lecture. But what I'm saying is you guys have formed a secure bond that actually is continuously improving both of you and will continue through the course of your life. That's the goal with secure attachment.
Wow.
That's amazing. And so you can kind of build these one-to-one, like these peer-to-peer, like attachment. There's foundation that can be laid and you can kind of build this attachment over time. I'm also curious though of delivering bad news in general. Like that one seemed like one that was specific to me that I was bringing up as something that I'm playing it out in my head. And is it something where you can just get more comfortable doing that specific thing, whether it's someone you're attached to or not?
Well, let's imagine you walk in, you have to deliver 100 pieces of bad news in a row. And you walk into each one cringing and tactical and really careful, and you're so nervous that you don't actually give the other person any heartfelt emotions, any care. You're very closed off and stiff, and they have no idea how you're feeling. They can't relate to you, and all you're doing is delivering bad news. So then they get upset, and then you can't relate to them, and you're just, well, I don't know, I'm sorry, man, it's just bad, and it goes horribly, and they get angry and they escalate, and you do that 100 times in a row. You are not going to walk out of those 100 times thinking like, it got easier delivering that news over time. Watching them like foam at the mouth and scream at me and throw a shoe, it was pretty cool, actually. I feel much better about it. Could you maybe desensitize to the terror and the trauma of it and just say, well, life is going to suck? Yes, you could. But generally speaking, it's the positive experiences where the human, they say, you know what, this is really awful, but thank you for being here with me. Thank you for being considerate. That was really helpful. The way you see people experience you and relate to you, the way that people bond to you, the way that they act differently based on your behaviors, the way that you see them, in essence, reward your honesty and reward more of your openness. If maybe on the 10th person you say, I'm just going to be honest, you walk in and say, look, I have really bad news to deliver. I'm here with you, and my heart is out for you, and I'm going to walk you through this, but this is what's going on, and here's how we're going to approach it. I think I have a plan. Here's how we can take care of it. Do you need to yell some profanity for a minute? Do you need to get it out, get the steam out? Whatever you got to do, I'm going to be here with you. And they say, you know what, this is horrible news, but thank you so much for being you. This is helpful. You've made this process much easier. Now you've seen that they relate to you differently, and you're forming a more secure attachment. The bonding hormones are there. As you release the bonding hormones, that's what really causes the transformation.
That makes so much sense. And so you become inherently more trusting as a result of having these positive experiences.
Sure.
And
do you want me to talk to you about the bonding hormones? Because the chemicals make the difference.
I'd be very interested.
Sure. So everybody at home, I promise this will not be a neurochemistry lecture. It's going to be mostly jargon-free. I have to explain this to my wife and even my 8-year-old son. I explain these chemicals to him so that he can understand what's going on. It helps, I promise. Okay, there's 6 big brain chemicals we need to know about, okay? One of them is cortisol. It's stress. We are always experiencing stress. It's like gravity on our body. You are always going to experience stress. Every day, some degree of stress, sometimes more than others. But cortisol, it's always going to be there in your system to some degree. Okay. Now, when we grow up in healthy, loving, secure families, our families are supposed to foster a sense of safety with us. We start developing something called an oxytocin bond. We give it to babies, when moms breastfeed. Okay. Babies give it to moms when they breastfeed. Oxytocin is what allows the letdown of milk. So moms who have a hard time breastfeeding their first baby, and she's also very anxious, it's usually an oxytocin letdown issue, not a milk supply issue, but it looks like a milk supply issue. Side note, we'll talk about that some other time. But the oxytocin bonding begins at birth and it continues, and you feel safe. As oxytocin, that love hormone, continues to nurture, you feel warm, you feel cared for, you feel loved. This is what prevents a lot of that anxious attachment because you don't believe you're unlovable. Now, as oxytocin continues to release, you get something called GABA, G-A-B-A, gamma-aminobutyric acid. GABA is an inhibitory neurotransmitter. What this means is it shuts down cortisol. It suppresses cortisol release. It stops it from flooding as much. It decreases the amount of cortisol you get, the severity of it, the length of it. It prevents you from feeling anxious or depressed. So the more loved and accepted that you feel, the more your brain releases a chemical that says, I don't have to feel stressed or scared because there's people who love me and they will help me solve problems. There's another bonding hormone called vasopressin. Men have more receptors for it, but women have receptors for it too. And vasopressin is the hormone released when we solve cortisol with another person. So when we do have cortisol and stress and we confront it and we overcome it together, whether that's solving a problem, rebuilding a car, going through a painful experience, hunting the mammoth together, you and me, Joey, right? Or whatever it might be, going through a painful birth, going through a difficult thing in our family, we overcome it together. Our brain tags that person, says they are a safe, trusted ally who will help me when times get hard. So we have vasopressin bonding with them. And then we have serotonin. Serotonin is a neurotransmitter that's linked to mood. Not 100% correlation, but linked to mood. And when we release oxytocin through good conversation, through hand-holding, through time together, through nurturing, when we release that, we get serotonin, which long-term creates satisfaction, joy, contentment. This is where much of our pleasure in life is supposed to come come from. Without all of that, what we have left is dopamine. Dopamine is just supposed to be a short-term little, oh, that felt good, remember that. That felt good, remember that. It's supposed to be a little bit here and there. Now, when we have, for example, avoidant attachment style really fast, avoidant attachment style is a lack of oxytocin, especially in childhood. They do not feel loved. They do not feel cared for. They have maximum cortisol all the time. So very low oxytocin, very low GABA, very low vasopressin, because they don't solve problems with other people because they don't trust other people. So they solve everything alone. Very low serotonin because they don't have open, intimate relationships with anybody. So then they have cortisol and dopamine. Those are the two things they have back to back. These men are incredible lone wolf survival kind of people, women too. Wonderful at business, incredible executives, great insurance adjusters. They understand risk more than anybody else because they're in perpetual survival mode. And they are endlessly tracking risk by themselves because they don't have the other bonding hormones. Anxious attachment style, they did receive oxytocin at some point, but it was taken away from them and then maybe given back and then taken away. And the baby said, something I'm doing is making my loving parent leave me over and over and over and reject me. It must be my fault. So they crave oxytocin all the time. And that's their measure of safety in relationships, is if someone else is giving them oxytocin. This is why anxiously attached women go look for men who give them validation up front in the relationship, a process called love bombing. It saturates her with oxytocin, and then she will do anything to keep him and please him so that he won't abandon her. It creates an oxytocin junkie. She gets a little bit of GABA, not enough to really suppress cortisol long term, but just in the moment. She feels safe a little bit in the moment, a little bit of serotonin. She's not going to chase the dopamine hits as hard as the avoidant man will, who that's all he has, but she will chase the oxytocin connections. This is how attachment issues in childhood, brain-wise, form all the way through adulthood. So what you're talking about there, Joey, what the two of you have formed biochemically is a process where you are giving each other oxytocin. Through giving each other oxytocin, you are giving each other GABA. You are making each other more resilient. That also happens to release more melatonin, so you sleep better at night, by the way. It helps utilize magnesium better so that your muscle cramping through your body doesn't impact you as hard. It actually relaxes your muscles and you use magnesium better. Most people who are stressed out have magnesium deficiency because of attachment issues and biochemistry. So you have given each other oxytocin, GABA, vasopressin, serotonin. So when you say, when I have these bad experiences or when I confront difficult things and it goes well, do I get better? Yes, biochemically you do, but the vehicle for that is the bonding with the other human being. Does that make sense?
Yes. Okay, so I'm looking at all this through the lens of my kids, and I have a couple pretty specific questions for you.
Of course. I'm used to that. By the way, I'm used to that with podcasts. Every podcast always turns into like, let's talk about me and my partner, or me and my children. I'm used to it. I need to keep like a cigar off camera, like Freud, like, tell me about your mother. I'm getting there.
So I have to ask, and a lot of people in our audience are very naturally minded, and so they understand there's a big variance, especially with birth experience. And I will say for us, I have noticed I have had an induction with a birth, I've had a C-section, and then we had a beautiful unmedicated home birth. And I have to say, I wonder if birth experience impacts your child's attachment. Is blocking the natural oxytocin that occurs during birth and giving maybe Pitocin instead, or just bypassing all of labor and doing a C-section, does that have implications on attachment formation?
I can only speak to that. We haven't done that research yet. Unfortunately, when John Bowlby, he created the attachment theory, when he died in the 1990s, a lot of research around attachment died with him, and it stopped for the large extent. Now, what we can do is piece together pieces on some hormones and their behaviors later on. So Dr. Sue Carter of the Kinsey Institute, for example, she's a phenomenally brilliant researcher who's researching oxytocin and vasopressin. I recommend everybody look up her work. She is astounding. What we can look at and say is that creatures need oxytocin, right? We need oxytocin, but we are also designed to accommodate imperfect environments. So right now, if every mom at home is listening to this and your heart is thumping in your chest and you're like, my goodness, I ruined my children from day one. I didn't have the perfect birth. I didn't breastfeed right. I put them in the wrong outfit one day. No, you are not doomed. Your children are not doomed. You are not a bad mom. You can absolutely turn around whatever challenges are happening right now. Attachment is meant to change. Bonding hormones are meant to change. We can improve this. Don't ever let anybody tell you different. We can. With childhood birth, for example, I can only speak to my own example. My wife and I, we have 5 children. We've had to induce all 5 children, because my wife has there's a medical term called an extremely competent cervix, and the water does not pop. So we have to pop, we have to induce. We've had to do that every single time. All of my children, 4 of my 5 children, have phenomenally good secure attachment. I will say this, the one child that I have who does not really exhibit fully secure attachment, they had a rather severe medical problem themselves that they were born with. So for the first year, there was a lot of disruption, a lot of sickness, a lot of medical interventions that really stressed them out and gave them a tremendous amount of cortisol. So what we've had to do is, as that child has grown, is really nurture them, really foster that, encourage them, and sometimes just point blank ask them as they've got a little bit older, do you ever have some of these anxious feelings? If you ever do you know that you can come to us? Do you know that we will care for you? Do you know that you are important to us? We've really just point blank been explicit. And I've seen a phenomenal turnaround in their attachment as they've grown, where they have vastly improved. Even now at the age of 6, they're doing incredibly well, better than they were before. So all of this can be fixed. All of it is fixable with explicit love and the right skills and the right approaches. But I think it's less about getting the experiences perfect and more about constantly adjusting to the experiences that we have had, so that we can always track where we're trying to go. Does that make sense, Liz?
Yeah, it does. So what are other tools for parents for when they're thinking through, okay, how can I create this secure attachment? I like what you said about being able to solve problems together and be collaborative. And I know a tension we feel sometimes is like, well, sometimes we want to foster independence. So we're like, go figure it out. And then, but are there, like
only sometimes,
where does this line, how do we toe this line as parents to create maybe regular, either like words we're saying to our kids or habits in our daily life that's going to help them create that secure attachment with us? Is it just quality time? What is it?
Wait a minute. Did you see what you just did there? That's exactly perfect example. Words we say to our kids or habits we do in our daily life. That's self. What can I do to act upon this human so that they feel better? And that right there is the essence of what we're doing. Even here in America, we are so individualistic that we can't even what can I do with my child? We're like, what can I do upon them so that they are this mighty being? That's what we're doing. And that's so much of us, right? So Joey, I'll turn this back to you. And again, I'm going to use you as a guinea pig. So thank you. Back in the days when you were a bit more nervous, in the days when you were more insecure, before you really fostered this deep connection, this leadership that you show today, back then, if somebody was to come to you and ask you a whole bunch of personal questions, how would you have felt?
I can remember specifically how I would react to a lot of this stuff, and I was a perpetual over exaggerator. I always wanted to seem, if someone asked me like, hey, in your sophomore year or junior year of high school soccer, how many goals did you score? I'm like, I might have known in my head I scored 13. But I'm just, I don't know, 15, 20. Like that might be how I speak. And so I don't know if that answers your question, but
a bit. So that tells me
yeah.
You probably would have had a rush of cortisol, some stress, like, oh no, this is a trial moment. I'm going to have to impress this person or I'll get exposed for not being good enough. And then your brain would say, well, I don't want to lie. And the other part of your brain would say, but I also don't want to be exposed. And then the fear takes over. So then you give in to the temptation and you make the choice to exaggerate, right? And then you can justify it to yourself after and you say, oh, I kind of feel a little bad, but I'm not going to think about that because at least I avoided the damage being done. Right. This is the
I gave a range, right?
I gave a range. It's not an accurate range, but it's a range. Yes. And that's what most people will do in their head right there.
I can always plead ignorance, right?
Yes. Now imagine if somebody came to you and your parent came to you and said, hey, Joey, you know what? I just want to know, like, how many goals did you score today? How many goals did you score today? And by the way, I'm going to be proud of you no matter what. I just kind of want to understand where you're at right now so that if you need some help, I can help you. What if they came to you that way? What answer would you give them?
I don't know that I would have lied to my parents or exaggerated to them.
But if they gave you the context.
Yeah, if they gave me the context, I mean, I believe with my parents, I would have. I'm trying to think of a time that I didn't to be more beneficial to the conversation.
Oh, it's all good.
Let's see. So wrestling is a good one. My dad was an Olympic wrestler, and I was kind of following in his footsteps, and I never really got as good as he did. Let's be very clear.
Mm-hmm.
And he would be at every one of my matches, and if I lost, he would always ask me things like, "Hey man, what happened out there?" And sometimes I would say things that would make him feel bad for me,
Mm-hmm.
because I didn't know how to tell him, like, I just couldn't do it. I didn't know how to say that.
Go. There we go. Now imagine if he had, and no, through no fault of him, right? Most parents today don't have the skills they need because we've lost many of those through just horrific conditions over the last 100 years. We've actually eroded most of our parenting styles. They're more survival styles than they are parenting styles now, to be honest with you. And most people are shocked to hear that, but we're mostly in survival mode, and we're trying to learn parenting from scratch as a society. So no fault to your dad on that. But imagine if he had known how to come to you and say, "Hey, you know what? I don't ever expect you to be as good as me. And so I'm going to ask you questions after matches. It is not to shame you, and it is not even to tell you didn't do it good enough. I just want to help you be as good as you can be. So if I'm going to ask you questions, please just give me the honest truth so that I can help you." Now imagine if he had known to do that.
Yeah, I probably would have. I think also that would have eliminated some of this like competitive energy I felt towards my dad, because there was always some of that going on, right? Where it's like there's this standard that's been set, and that's a big deal, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, and I was very good, so don't get it twisted. Like, my dad was working me when I was young all the way up, and so I got very good, but I never did reach kind of the level that he did. And so, yeah, it's a big deal. It's for sure. I think that would have been a very big deal to hear that and kind of diffuse some of that competitive energy and be, hey, listen, we don't care where you land. I want to make sure, one, that you're having fun.
Yeah.
And fun, let's define that. Do you want to be winning more? Because I'm going to ask you questions to help you win more. If you're like, yo, I don't care about winning, I'm just here to have fun. I'm going to ask you questions because it's fun for me to be here with you to know what was happening in your head. Like that kind of stuff would have been helpful for me, I think.
That's collaborating with your child. Even if you don't agree with your child, collaborating with your child, asking them more questions is incredibly important, and also helping them understand that your love for them does not have a limit on it. There's an incredible speaker. His name is Vinh Giang. His family's from Vietnam, and he was raised in Australia, if I'm remembering right. And it's part of his story because he tells the story of when he thought his parents were going to murder him. And it's the most phenomenal story if you've ever heard it. He was in, I think it was a very, very prestigious university, and he went home to tell his Vietnamese parents that he was going to drop out of school and become a magician. And it was his life plan. And as he says, when you tell your Asian parents that you are going to drop out of school and become a magician, it does not typically go well, is what he was saying during his story. So he went and he told them, and he delivered the news in their living room. And he said he remembered his parents' faces, just like his mom started crying and ran out of the room into the kitchen. His dad was just stone-faced and got up without speaking and went into the kitchen to follow mom. God. And he was sitting in the living room like what, like, wow, man, this was intense. And then he realized, well, they both went into the room where the knives are stored. And he thought, okay, well, I have a younger brother. They're probably going to come out. They're probably going to murder me, and they'll just raise him in my place. That's probably what they're planning. So he said they came back out, and they were not holding knives. And his dad walked up to him and said, "I don't agree with what you're doing, but as long as I am alive, I will be your safety net."
Wow.
And that is collaborating with your kids. You don't even have to agree with them. You don't even have to say everything is perfect and you're a perfect little princess or anything like that. Agreeing, working with them, collaborating with them, helping them, working together as a family, all of that. Oxytocin, vasopressin, GABA, serotonin, all of that, it feeds together in the way that you collaborate with your children. Now, think back a moment. They fostered a relationship where at least their child could come to them and give them hard news, right? Very, very difficult news. He told them up front, face to face, what was going to happen. Yes, it was a painful experience, but they went through it together and they bonded. And now when he speaks about his parents, it's just they're phenomenal figures in his life. He runs like a 10 or more, like an 8 or more figure business. Like, the man's incredible. He's phenomenal, but he could not have launched that quite possibly without his father in that moment, collaborating with him, even during disagreement. That's what we as parents need to be doing. It's not about figuring out what can I say to my child. It's not thinking the night before how to set up the dominoes. It's not trying to figure out how can I cultivate the right behaviors in myself, or how can I say things in a perfect way so that other people will react right. It's what question can I ask that's going to lead this person to really talk with me? How can we together build something better than we could build separately? What can we do together in this moment that's not only going to be a win for both of us, but is going to lead to better opportunities down the road for both of us? If you can think that way while you're parenting, that is 99% of the job.
That's huge, by the way. It sounds like giving our kids context, being honest with them, and then collaborating in a sense of, yeah, you're right, not having the entire objective of the conversation already in your head, but maybe just presenting a topic and saying, how do you feel about that? What's your reaction? How are you feeling? Tell me something about that. That's really good.
I've had coaching clients. So back in the day when I used to just work with massively at-risk families, I had teens come in at 13 that were punching their parents in the face, screaming at them, doing drugs, prostitution, all kinds of stuff. And the parents would be at wit's end, like, what do I do with these kids? They hate my guts. I kind of hate them. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to say. And I would have to step into the family and try to fix that family through attachment work. And the first thing I would implement, the very first thing I would implement was what's called the 10-minute challenge. The 10-minute challenge is, can you as a parent step in for just 10 minutes a day, 10 minutes a day, and do nothing but ask your child questions? That's it. You don't make statements. You don't judge. You don't lecture. You don't do anything. You just learn about your child for 10 minutes. You ask them questions. You be curious about your child as if you don't know everything about them, as if they might be growing in ways you don't know yet, that you haven't seen yet. You get curious about your child and you learn about them and you help them understand that they are worthy of your time and that you are interested in them and curious about them. You ask them 10 minutes of questions every day. And when parents did this, it was almost a universal turnaround, almost no matter what the kid was doing. It was a phenomenal turnaround with angry teens who didn't want to speak to their parents. And they were standoffish the first week or two and would barely answer questions. And by the third week, they were thriving in it and doing a phenomenal job, really connecting. All of these families, this intense bonding, 10 minutes a day of good questioning and really learning about your kids. That's one way that you can start collaborating with them right there, is just by learning about them.
That's good. I've heard you say before that we've had 100 years of breakdown in the family structure, and you've mentioned that a little bit on the show. I want to dig into that. What exactly do you mean by that?
Yeah, so 100 years ago, don't get me wrong, for everybody in the audience that's listening to this, you might be used to other people idealizing the past. That's not what we do here. But 100 years ago, things were very different than they were now. And they were more in line with what our biology, our neurology is designed for. The majority of Americans, for example, were living either in more rural areas or living more in at least close family units, so that you had larger connections with the people around you, even the unrelated people. You had what was called the kith and kin network of families that you had known for a long time. You were on land that you'd been on for a long time. Most people didn't move more than 15 miles beyond the place where they were born. Travel was a bit more difficult. It's not that nobody traveled, but everybody tended to settle down near each other, and you knew the people around you. You really knew them. So you had grandma, you had aunts, you had uncles, you had grandmothers, and everybody flooding through your giant family network. So you might have 100 people in your system that you could go to, that you could talk with, that you at least knew. You felt like you were part of an ecosystem. Okay. Over time, through the Industrial Revolution, through the World War I, which is a meat grinder, that the men died, and then many more men mentally didn't really come back in a state to be healthy and functioning. You had the Roaring 20s, where people were just decadent, trying to blow off their anger and their steam, and a whole generation in there. You had the massive stock market crash, the Depression, the Dust Bowl. You had World War II. You had then everything started really falling apart then, as the silent generation and the greatest generation, they just hunkered down into this bunker mentality of just survive, work 16 or 18-hour days. People forget that 100 years ago, when the Industrial Revolution really kicked off, it was normal to have an 80 to 100 hour work week. And if you didn't work that, they would just fire you on the spot. If your arm got ripped off in a machine, they would just fire you. We didn't get the 40-hour work week till Henry Ford built that and then got sued by competitors who said that wasn't a reliable method of working and nobody else could compete by letting their workers only work 40 hours a week. So then you had in the 1920 was the first time you really saw people moving from family farms into cities, so that city living overtook rural living. You saw the breakdown of family units, especially people in the middle of the country being forced to move to the coastal cities. The Okies from Oklahoma moving into California in massive droves, barefoot children in schools because they couldn't even afford shoes. But the massive breakdown of family units, religious communities being obliterated and torn apart, kith and kin networks destroyed. Then the breakdown of families and the breakdown of even grandmothers, grandfathers, aunts, uncles. By the time you get to the baby boomers in the 60s, they saw their parents raised miserably through all of these years of war and atrocity and suffering. And the baby boomers, some of them understood that their parents' really tough love was for survival and love, and a lot of them didn't get it. And they said, "Screw you! I hate you! Responsibility is garbage. Family is terrible. All of you are evil. I'm out of here." Which is why the boomers are currently tripling divorce rates even in their 80s. They're still getting divorced. Some are outweighting each other to hopefully the other person gets cancer and I don't have to file for divorce, but they're still tripling the divorce rates right now, right? So what we saw was then a massive breakdown as they began instituting dating, right? With their mobile sex wagons, the car that came out. So it was easy to just drive anywhere and have sex anywhere you wanted to. That's what really created modern dating, was the baby boomers and the car effect. And then that led into Generation Y, Generation X, where the baby boomers angrily raised them and didn't have many parenting skills at all. They just kind of yelled and screamed at them. And Generation Y and Generation X just look like deer in the headlights all the time because they don't know what to do. They're just petrified. Baby boomers divorced the first set of spouses, started having a second set of spouses, set up a new family, the millennials, and said, "I'm not going to make the mistakes I made with the first kids. I'm going to raise these kids to be tougher." And it did not work so well. So millennials and boomers absolutely hate each other, and they would shoot each other if they could, and they just despise one another. But now millennials are raised on the message that sometimes love doesn't work. Be careful of men, ladies. Be careful of men because they'll hurt you at a moment's notice. They'll destroy you. Focus on your career first. Men are garbage. And then men are raised with women they're not capable of being faithful. They're evil. Just don't even get married, guys. Just have fun. And then millennials are now trying to raise the next generation, Generation Z, Generation Alpha. They have never seen a functioning family system. They have been raised in essentially what is the rubble of a civilization, the rubble of a society. Culturally, our machines are keeping us running, right? And right now, all the people who know how to run the machines are retiring, so we're about to lose a lot of those machines, but it has kept the corpse running. But the youngest generations, the reason they have 65% insecure attachment, which we see with social collapse, we see that during cataclysmic events throughout human history, when you start seeing that massive breakdown and the rise of survival adaptations, which is what avoidant and anxious attachment styles are. That's living in the rubble of a greater civilization. That's what the new generations are doing. And they're having to try to fight the rubble, fight the scavengers, fight the old people who say life is perfect, quit complaining. And they're trying to build relationships now. All they understand is sex and pleasure and keeping yourself safe from relationships, because relationships are not trustworthy. That's why we're seeing the massive breakdown in the relationship structures today. So that's the last 100 years in a rough nutshell.
Wow. We're millennials, so we're raising, what are our kids?
I think Alpha is where we are.
Alpha. Our oldest is 13, and our youngest, it will be born in November. So whatever 2024 would be. I don't know if that's a new
kind of
generation
split between Gen Z and Gen Alpha.
Okay. I'm curious, does your parents getting a divorce obviously have an impact on your attachment style?
So there you are living in a marriage. And there you are with two people who are supposed to be able to collaborate with each other against the world.
Yeah.
And their purpose of being together is the stability and safety of the family legacy. And they can't even communicate and solve problems enough to even work together as people. So then your family, your whole safety world that's supposed to protect you gets shattered And now you have two separate homes with people who can't stand each other. And you now have to go back and forth between different houses. And everybody you know has exactly the same thing happening. You can't talk to anybody about it, except maybe a paid therapist, because you don't want to bring it up to your mom or your dad because they'll feel bad or they'll get angry or you don't even know what. And now you're used to the idea that people who are family can abandon each other at the drop of a hat if they just don't feel like making it work. So yeah, family divorce is overwhelmingly destructive for children. It's reckless divorce where it's just happening, I believe, is a form of child abuse.
Wow. Yeah, I'm thinking we both come from parents with, I would say, very healthy, strong marriages. And so it probably helped us. We've only been married for 9 years, but I feel like it has to help. It has to somehow subconsciously help us to just, divorce is not even an option in our brain.
It's one of those things where it's like I can't empathize with people that I want to help, but also it's like in our marriage we don't even understand what that would look like.
Because we've never seen it. So what a blessing that is. Like what a privilege that is to be in that situation. But I do, when you were talking about that, I thought what a generational impact that has on folks. I'm interested in adoption and how attachment, we can meet those needs with those who are adopted, because I know that there's a certain level of trauma in all forms of adoption. And so how can we come alongside those kids and really patch any sort of attachment or abandonment that might inherently be there?
Yeah, understanding that attachment issues are a survival adaptation for bad circumstances. So, if there's a bad circumstance that would lead to a child being taken away from their family of origin for whatever reason, then that's a bad circumstance. It's almost guaranteed that they're likely to have attachment issues. Your goal is to not make sure they never get the problem and then hope everything's fine. Your goal is to be aware that there is going to be a problem and that you, as their new parent, you can help foster them through that. You can guide them through that, but you can't do that by acting upon them. You have to do that by collaborating with them. The core of secure attachment is the belief that others will collaborate with you in good faith when you feel scared or uncertain or stressed. That is the core of it. So when they are scared or uncertain or stressed, have you had conversations with them about the reality of those feelings? Have you been clear with them about what adoption means? Have you been clear with them about what would end your relationship and make you unadopt them? Maybe nothing in the world, but if that's the case, you need to be explicit about that. Most people will avoid that and say, oh, that's kind of a sensitive topic. I'll assume that they know it, right? I'll just tell them, I'll say I love them every day and help them understand. No, be explicit. Be explicit, because the thought is there somewhere in their head, conscious or unconscious. I lost my other family, or they gave me up. I could lose this family or be given up again. That thought is there. So having that conversation and say, look, I know this will be a hard thing to talk about, but do you ever feel this? And if so, I will not be angry at you. I just want to help you not feel that anymore, because here's where I'm at with this topic. And being able to have those discussions with those kids, asking how they feel. Again, asking more questions, understanding them. The message that's sent. Oh my goodness. Well, let's do this. Let's play this game. Liz, I'm going to assume that Joey asks you lots of questions about your day, right? Let's say he comes home, he walks in the kitchen, you're sitting there, you're doing something at the table, and he says, hey, how's your day? And you say, oh, it's this and this happened. He goes, oh, really? Tell me more about that. And he's asking more questions, and he's actually kind of curious. So you set aside whatever you're doing, you share with him, and he's, wow, and he starts asking deeper questions. Tell me more. What happened there? Why did that happen? Does that usually happen? And he's really curious about you, okay? What does that make you feel?
Loved and heard.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Safe.
Loved in what way?
Like he's interested in my day.
Like maybe you're worthy of his time.
Yeah, for sure.
And you're worthy of his attention. He's happy to know you.
Or he's proud of what I did that day. I think he's
proud of what you did that day. Right. All of these are important feelings that can only be gathered if somebody asks questions. This is why women get sad if their husband isn't asking them questions. If he just kind of stomps in the kitchen, and he comes in and he goes, and she says, hey, I did this thing today. And he goes, good for you. And then he goes and makes himself a sandwich and then walks out of the room to go watch TV, right? The message that's sent is, you are not even important enough for me to ask a follow-up question. I'm not even curious about you. You're unworthy of my time. You are not interesting. And many of us unknowingly do this with our kids, with our spouse, with whomever, because we just don't stop and think about it. Hey, I should be asking them more questions. So the opposite is also true. The more diligently that we show that curiosity, the better. But quite frankly, again, going back to explicitness, saying, hey, you know what? I haven't asked you enough questions, and I've realized that I think I know you, but I'd actually like to get to know you better. So in the next 50 years, I'm going to be asking you a lot more questions than I normally would. Please don't feel like I'm interrogating you, and I'm not trying to get something out of you. Like I'm not going to trap you. I just want to get to know you, and it has never occurred to me in the past that I can do that by asking you. So I'm going to ask you a lot more questions. Like, let them know in advance, collaborate with them in advance. That's rather than spring a million questions on them, especially if you have a team. Tell them why you're going to ask questions so that they can now invest and collaborate with you during that conversation. They can say, oh, they're trying to get to know me. Oh yeah, I remember they told me that. Okay, I'll play along.
That's good. Yeah, again, giving that context and then inviting them into collaboration. That's the little formula I'm
Remember
grasping.
that with adopted kids, many of them have experienced the severing of an oxytocin relationship. So they either, some of them have. So they're going to blame themselves and think that they were abandoned and cast aside because they are unworthy of love. So spreading the opposite message and helping foster oxytocin bonding by reducing their cortisol. Cortisol goes over and blocks the receptors for the oxytocin so that you can't experience it. You got to bring their cortisol down and then foster that oxytocin release with acceptance, love, and nurturing. Or they're avoidantly attached because they came from really painful experience environments and they believe other people are whack jobs, and they will not bond with other people because they won't become vulnerable enough. So you have to really foster that and help them understand you're not going to be arbitrary toward them or upon them. Acting upon them is the worst thing you can do. You're going to work with them and collaborate with them, and that you're going to ask them questions, but not as an interrogator, because you want to help facilitate the best outcomes with them. Help them understand that you're going to make their life better because they work with you. Those are the two key pieces you can really do with anybody who's adopted, or frankly, anybody who has attachment issues.
What about for couples who haven't yet reached that secure attachment, and maybe one of them's anxious, one of them's detached,
avoidant? Yeah.
Avoidant. What are their first steps that they can take, aside from maybe the first person asking questions? Because I think a lot of people go straight to like, oh, we need marriage therapy. We need marriage counseling. And then the husband who's detached or avoidant is like, heck no, I'm not going to talk to this lady. So that breaks down. So what do they do?
I love this question. I was a marriage therapist for many, many years, and I remembered seeing plenty of those couples come in where the wife is like, all right, we're here. It's going to be everything. You're going to save our marriage. And the guy's like, I would rather have my fingernails ripped off than be here, and I'm not going to say a word or it's being used against me, right? And that's very often the feeling of going into marriage therapy, which is why marriage therapy often has a fairly low success rate with couples where it's the anxious woman and the avoidant man, fairly low. I just did a video on this on my YouTube channel. I have a number of coaching clients who come into me having gone through 4 or 5 marriage therapists and got worse. They come into me and say, Adam, what's going to make the difference here? And I tell them, number one, you cannot have a blame game happening. So the avoidant person can't walk in feeling like they're going to be blamed just because they're not talking about feelings enough, or they're going to be demonized, they're going to be attacked. The anxious person also is going to overshare a lot of feelings with you and feel like they've been treated like crap for all these years because they've given, never asked for anything in return, never were explicit, never were clear, never gave measurable targets for the other person to hit, right? So the other person feels demonized again. But the anxious person doesn't really even want their marriage dissolved. The anxious person wants things fixed. They just don't see that the other person will ever love them. So it's almost like a doomed sort of feeling. So the number one thing that has to happen with couples who have these challenges is even learning that there is a different way of relating to humans than they are each currently doing. For avoidant men, the question usually comes up, look, are you actually happy with the way that you're living? Are you actually fulfilled? Do you ever wonder if there's something that you're missing because you're just surviving day to day? Are you ever able to come down out of stress mode into more of a peace mode where you can relax? Can you take your armor off when you come home and close the door? Can your armor ever come off? Or are you just exhausted trying to be tactical? Wouldn't it be nice if you had a couple people in your life you could trust to lower that guard and be at peace with even just a couple of people? There's a way of doing that. It's just that your brain right now is built to prevent you from doing that. We just need to get you to a place where you can choose to open up when appropriate, with the right people, and one of those being hopefully your spouse. Let's figure that out. And then the spouse, the anxious attached woman, coming in and saying, wouldn't it be nice if your feelings weren't constantly spiking all the time? Wouldn't it be great if you could be certain somebody loves you, even if they don't text you back right away? Wouldn't it be great if you didn't have to overthink everything and try to please everybody? Wouldn't it be great if you didn't have perfectionist tendencies driving you crazy, where you feel like you would never, ever be enough? Wouldn't it be great to just rest at night? Well, we can build that. We just have to teach you to be open and explicit with other people so they can start accepting you and giving you the love that you've never thought you were worthy of. Let's build that conversation. So then we just get them both to that place and we say, okay, let's talk about the relationship each of you wants. And by and large, most people agree on the marriage they actually want, but they're surprised because they think the other person wants selfishness and pleasure, endless pleasure for them. But most people don't. They want stability, they want predictability, they want respect, and they want honesty. That's what most people want in a relationship, so they can solve problems without things getting worse. Then we build that agreement. We build a marriage agreement, almost like a business agreement, where the two people can work together, where it's all on the table. And it's shocking when you do that with most people. Then you can move into risk assessment and say, okay, what's preventing us from having this kind of joy? What's preventing us from building this? How can we work together as a team to start resolving these problems? Now, what you've done is you've brought a lot of their cortisol down and a lot of their pain and their fear. And now you are launching them at problems to get them that vasopressin bond, where their brain will say, wow, we solved problems together. So instead of a cortisol association with each other, where they say, you get in my way from making life better, you say, we worked on making our life better together, and it actually was effective. So when couples start solving their problems, then it opens up their oxytocin receptors, and they can start intimately bonding with each other and really fully connecting with joy. They can start walking together, talking, holding hands, smiling, making love differently. Everything goes different, but you have to unify first around an agreement and then launch at the risks and the problems together as a team. If you can do that, you can make just about every marriage work.
Wow. That's incredible. What are you thinking in your head?
I've got all kinds of I got a few questions written down.
You are the mouthpiece for the audience. Hit me with a question right now. So hit me with as many as you have. Let's do them rapid fire.
Right on. So the first one would be, when it comes to like diagnosing, maybe that's the wrong term here, but kind of creating some self-awareness of where maybe you personally are, or maybe where your kids are. What are some of the things to like look for? Because all the parents that are listening to this right now are like, where are my kids? And what's my spouse doing? They're going to walk into the room and kick the door open and be like, you're avoidant, right? And I'd say, like, as maybe the better approach would be to share this episode and ask them what they think. But what would be some ways, some signs or things to look for that are kind of symptoms of whether it be avoidant, anxious, or a blended attachment?
Yeah, and you're right. Diagnosing is the wrong word. We would never diagnose. And we don't even want to label somebody else, because the worst thing you could do is go to your husband and say, oh, you're avoidant, because his brain will click in and he's like, all right, here's another jerk coming at me, telling me I'm a bad person because all I've done is try to survive in my life. And now here you are yelling at me for not having enough warm, fuzzy unicorn feelings. Okay, screw you. I'm going to just placate you and shut this conversation down as fast as I humanly can, or I'm going to be out the door. That's how that game is going to play out. Exactly. So the ways you can tell this, if somebody is completely siloed off from everybody else with a wall up and never opens up, doesn't share their feelings, says a lot of things like, no one's coming to save me, it's just me by myself, I can't trust anybody anyway, no one really cares about my feelings, I don't have time for anything, it is what it is their favorite phrasing all the time. They never, ever, ever can open up about challenges, about anything, and it's just complete shutdown. But they are providing, they are working hard diligently. Survival is everything for them. You confront them about not giving to your kids enough, and they're like, look at all the things I give to my kids. They bleed for their kids. Maybe they're a workaholic and they give everything to their family, right? That would look more like avoidant attachment style. Okay, other people are the problem, survival is mandatory, everyone else is going to get stressed out and be unreliable, so it's just me against the world. I will carry my family on my back, and that's how we will survive, and someday I will die, and that will be the end of it. That's much more avoidant attachment style. Okay, other people are the problem. Anxious attachment style is the opposite. I am the problem. There's a fatal flaw in me that is always going to ruin every relationship. It's just a matter of when. I am going to get abandoned because I deserve to be abandoned. They are placating. They are eager to please. They're approval seeking. But they tend to do nice things for other people, hoping those people will care for them. And in a long-term 10, 15-year relationship, they start to kind of get resentful that the other person doesn't take care of their needs and doesn't give back to them. We see this as what's called nice guy syndrome, where they do nice things for you, hoping to try to earn points in return to try to get what they want. It's the guy that does all the chores in the house and sends you photographs of every clean house, every clean room, and then you get home and within the first half hour he's happy and wagging his tail, but then he starts getting more sullen, more resistant, more miserable, and sort of pulls away from you. Well, it's because he was expecting you to reward him with sex and pat him on the head, and that's nice guy. That's an anxiously attached man is typically what that is. So yeah, that's why chore play doesn't work, guys. So this is what you're looking for in your life. Do they believe they are inferior and have to play a game to make other people like them, or they will get abandoned and rejected? Or do they think that other people are unreliable, so they have to completely wall off and protect themselves from other people? That's more what you're looking at. Perfectionism, high stress levels, high anxiety responses, right? All of that is what you're really tracking for. That usually tracks back to attachment challenges. So look for those things. And then if they have them, yes, you can share this episode. I have episodes on my YouTube channel, 7 signs of anxious attachment style, what men with an avoidant attachment style need to be happy. These are things you can watch together and sort of talk about. Don't diagnose, don't pathologize somebody, but say, what do you think of this? What do you think of this? Could this be influencing our dynamic? That's a great way to say that. Do you think this is a risk that we are dealing with? That's an even better way to say it. Avoidantly attached people really track risks carefully. So if you say, you're a problem, no. But if you say, hey, I think there are risks present in our relationship that we could be managing better together. Here's something I think could be one risk. Can you look at this and tell me if you think this could be impacting us? And if so, what would you like to do about it? That's a much better way to discuss feelings with an avoidantly attached person.
So good. Next question. Can you be too attached? Maybe it's a bad question, but I just was like...
no, that's a great question. Okay. Sometimes I feel too attached. I want to hear the answer.
That is a great question. With a secure attachment, no. With a secure attachment, no. What most people think of when they think of too attached is called enmeshment. Now, enmeshment is actually bad attachment. Enmeshment is the belief that you have to please others and that you're going to be overly connected with each other, very poor boundaries. It usually is drawn from people with severe attachment issues in parenting down into their children, or even personality disorders down into their children, kind of thing, where you are overly bonded and have to caretake everybody else's feelings. That is not secure attachment. That's an insecure attachment. Enmeshment, definitely a problem.
Wow, fascinating.
Yeah, I've heard enmeshment, especially in regards to like if you are raising kids and say maybe like you overshare with your teen, like you let them know all your emotions and you bring them in as almost like a friend to you.
Yes.
In a way where now they're almost carrying some of the family burden.
Caretaker.
Yeah, and I've heard that dynamic, and I've almost seen that play out before, and that you might think, oh, we're securely attached, we're so close, like classic Gilmore Girls example, right? Lorelai and Rory, that's enmeshment, right? But anyone who's watched that knows what I'm talking about. So you're saying that's not the same. Being close and being maybe friendly with your child, especially as they're teens and young adults, is not the same as securely attached.
Yeah, no, I share my emotions with my children so they can understand what I'm experiencing, but my emotions are not their problem. Okay. They don't become my caretakers. They're not my parents. It's called parentification. They're not parenting me. They don't become my friend. They're not protecting me from my feelings. They don't have to protect me from their feelings, right? I share my experiences with them so I'm relatable and they can track them and then model off of them. But no, enmeshment is exactly what we have to avoid. Your child should never become your caretaker until you're 90 years old.
Okay.
Does a secure attachment between a like peer-to-peer versus a parent-to-child look different?
No, fascinatingly, a secure attachment is a secure attachment. There's 1,000 ways to do things wrong, but a secure attached relationship, it's open and explicit communication, very clear about needs, very transparent about desires. It almost looks transactional, except the transactions, they're discussed up front and then they're fairly invisible and they're based on generosity instead of based on nickel and diming each other down. That's not exploitation. and they are adjustable for reality and for circumstances. It's, oh, hey, here's where I'm at right now. Here's what's going to change. Oh, hey, thanks for letting me know. It's the secure relationships all fairly much look the same, just with different personalities involved. But insecure relationships are where all the variability is.
Is attachment like is it seasonal? Like, can you go through a season of secure attachment and a season of maybe it's a bad question too, but I'm just curious.
No. You're not wrong. People ask me this all the time. The way they usually ask it is, can you have different attachment styles with different people? Is usually the way I heard that asked.
Okay.
Or in different approaches or different relationships. Professionally great, romantically terrible. Yes.
Interesting.
Yes. Your attachment behaviors will change based on your perceived risk, based on the connection with the people involved, based on the level of intimacy that you have to open up to. Avoidantly attached people are incredible executives, incredible business people. They are phenomenal in business. They're the charismatic people everybody else loves, but they could not keep a dating or marriage relationship alive to save their life. It will crumble and it will be obliterated. That's most of the avoidantly attached people come into me. You know, they've got $100 million businesses, but they're on their third divorce and they got a $9 million prenup on the line. They're about to lose a house and kids. Like that's the level of destruction in one, but amazing in the other capacity. But also the people you're with. If you're with a securely attached person, but you primarily have been with avoidantly attached people in the past, your experience will be vastly different with that person as they guide you and pull you into healthier relationships. Being around securely attached people means they're going to ask you questions. They're going to call you out. They're going to get you exposed. They're going to ask things, and then they're going to respond in a good, proper way. And you're going to be stunned and confused about why this person is reasonable, but it's going to feel really, really good. And if you can stick with it, you yourself will grow more secure over time.
So attachment can kind of be like the show Severance. You could walk into one room and be a different attachment versus another room. You could walk into and be
based on the relationships that you're adapting to. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. That's so interesting. And so there may be some when we're not diagnosing, but having some internal conversations around the realities of in ourself, we may want to look at different in a various amounts of situations. So for me, it was with Elizabeth, right? It felt very easy to answer a lot of questions of like, yeah, what? Maybe Elizabeth and I, hopefully, have a very secure attachment. And then I think that as I look back into my past, where I maybe had some less secure attachments, whereas now having hard conversations with my dad would be like the easiest thing in the world. Like him and I are so close, it's crazy. But there's definitely some seasonality there where maybe it was a little more challenging. And I felt like I had to live up to something, and I think it took some time to kind of get through some of that stuff. So super interesting. It's a very fascinating thought. Now with our children, as we're kind of rearing them and hoping to put them on the right path, they could potentially be attached at home and avoidant or anxious at school or with their friends or in other situations. Do you have any advice or tips that we could maybe address that or lean into that?
Sure. Remember that home is the hub where they are going to become their strongest self. So they probably shouldn't be great at home and bad out in the world. What's probably going to be happening is they might be partially good at home, but really good at hiding it and covering it up. And then it's really revealed when they're out in the world having to navigate relationships that are faster paced, that are changing, where they're trying to find intimacy with a partner. They're trying to learn dating. They're trying to get people to approve of them, right? It's less of a stable environment. You might have not perfect attachment at home, but it feels as good as you can get it. But it really gets revealed when your daughter goes out and starts dating people and she keeps connecting with emotionally unavailable men over and over and over and over. And that's, we see that left and right. Social media has made that much worse because it's much easier for women to get validation now. And the stakes are raised on what they have to do now to compete with other women for attention. So a lot of women, young women are with attachment issues are getting eaten alive the moment they step out of their family home because things were not solid enough in their home. So the best thing parents can be doing is fostering that secure attachment at home so your kids have the next 80 years of healthy professional and personal relationships. Now, are things complicated outside the home with peers? Yeah, they are. They can be. But what's fascinating is we have we have a two-pool effect going on, really, where securely attached people signal differently to each other. Let's say if it's a field of fireflies, people who are securely attached signal blue to each other, and people who are insecurely attached will signal red to each other. Now, the two groups can't really see each other's signals. They don't even know what they're looking at. Securely attached people are going to go out there and have very frank, upfront discussions, very clear, very transparent. They're going to ask really clear questions. They're not going to get overly emotionally invested right up front, so they're not going to love bomb you. They're also not going to be craving approval. They're going to have really clear discussions about religious faith, about values, about long-term goals, and then pair up based on those logical things, and then make relationships kind of functioning that work. And then if something doesn't go right, they're going to say, hey, I noticed you just did this. It seems kind of weird. Tell me about that. And they'll confront the other person fairly directly. So they chase insecurely attached people away, but they also don't usually get why those people are acting that way. It's like, why are you acting so illogically? That's a bad way to have relationships. So the securely attached people segregate out, and the insecurely attached people are not receiving the instant emotional bombardment of we've just met, but now we're best friends, or hey, I know I just met you 5 minutes ago, but here's my nudes. They're not getting that overwhelming stimulation right up front, and they're not getting that lack of boundary either, where you can cross really fast and build these intimate emotional connections that quickly. But they also are not going to be asking each other probing personal questions that reveal core pieces. So they're not going to be signaling correctly either. They're going to be flashing with feelings, not with substance. So it's substance and feelings. Those are the two different pools. So they tend to segregate out very, very, very hard, which is why most people with attachment issues will say, I have never met a securely attached person in my life. I don't even think they exist. And securely attached people will say, really? There's people who live like this that are that afraid? Why don't they just talk to people? The two pools, it's like two populations who are invisible to each other, sharing the same land.
Wow. That's fascinating. I love that description. I'm curious how you yourself raising kids will talk to your kids about dating given everything you know about attachment. Are there things that you'll coach them in, or is it just kind of an extension of their secure attachment to you?
Well, it's my job. It's my job to teach them those core skills. It's not my job to, say you will stay here, I will find you a spouse. And it's not arranged marriage, maybe assisted marriage where we vet with them.
Sure.
But it's definitely when you find a spouse someday or someone who could work for you, make sure you ask them blank. Right? Hey, see how important this is for our family. When you get married someday, make sure the person can X. Make sure you have these questions, these conversations. We guide them with their friends. They say, oh, someone made me sad. Well, did you tell them that made you sad? No, I came and told you. Okay, go tell them. Go talk to them and see how that goes. Talk to them about that feeling. And then we guide them through that. We guide them through that with each other. So they are learning secure attachment. And then when the time comes to start looking for a partner, absolutely. You're going to say, okay, look, here's your options. here's how online dating is supposed to work. Here's how it doesn't work. I run people through that all the time in coaching. Here's how looking for a partner can work. Here's this and this and this. What's fascinating is securely attached people usually date through their family and friend networks anyway. They've sort of reestablished a bit of that kith and kin network. And so they have people look for them in Matchmaker. They pair up with other families that are adjacent because, again, two different populations living within one area. So that population, they really cross connect with each other more. They're more likely to be properly bonded through those networks and have 10, 15 years of data on the person that they're dating. And then the person they're dating has every reason to treat them politely because their families know each other. Now it's not two random strangers who happen to bump into each other and there's nothing holding them together to be honorable or kind to each other. So it's a vastly different world. So yes, I'm definitely going to be teaching my kids proper courtship, but I'm also teaching my kids right now how to be proper in marriage, how to communicate, how to talk, how to have conflict, how to resolve conflict. They see my wife and I every single day in our marriage. That's the best advertisement for a healthy romantic connection.
That's so good. Last question, then I'm going to let you go. I'm so sorry. I'm being so annoying here. But we've talked a lot about the nurturing of attachment with our children, with our peers, and with each other, right? And I'm just curious: is there a nature possibility here? And the scenario I'm going to pose is all kids can be so different, and no one would ever, I don't believe, deny that. Just everyone's got their own quirks and personalities, and the example I'd bring up is like like enneagrams or things that we believe that people are born with, where someone's going to be more kind of extroverted, where someone might be more introverted. Does nature play into this at all?
So that's a fascinating question. Can attachment be insecure by nature? By definition, no, because it's a survival adaptation. However, there are a tremendous number of variables that come into play. Some fascinating research when they take a mouse and stress it almost to the point of death, and then they go and they have it breed with a pool of other mice. They find that the offspring of that mouse, down through multiple generations, 3-4 generations, continues to carry markers of elevated cortisol levels.
Wow.
That our ancestors' trauma is causing us to be hypervigilant, causing us to be more careful, causing us to be more aware, causing us to be cautious. That's what that is supposed to do, is help us survive in an environment where there was a trauma in case it comes back. So there are elements of that. Mother's cortisol level in during pregnancy, mother's cortisol level perhaps during birth, right? You had asked me, Liz, about the birth process. Cortisol levels during birth can be actually quite impactful, right?
Okay.
But it's also what you do afterward. It's how you help them bring back down. So there could be some genetic components, some bio pieces that we need to definitely look at. There's also massive variability in personalities. My oldest child, he came out like he came out of the womb and he immediately stuck both thumbs in his mouth and was sucking on them. Then he screamed. Then he started peeing on everybody. And then he just wanted to keep sucking his thumb and kept yelling at all of us when we would try to take his thumb away. And he has pretty much grown up his life that way, where he knows exactly what he wants at any given moment. And if you try to disrupt that, it's like, whoa. But we've learned to work with him, to talk with him about what he's looking for, and then help him really choose the best path. So we don't like yell at him like, you're going to do it my way, where it's an endless battle of wills. That would never have worked. So if we didn't tailor our approach to his personality, we would have given him the worst version of his personality. We are trying to foster the best version of his personality. Okay. Versus my youngest daughter is much more mild. She's much more calm. She's like, I won't say she's definitely got some fire, but in a different way. But she is very accommodating. She is very caring. She is ready to play with you. She's ready to do what you want and happy to follow you. But then she's going to be doing things the way that she wants to do within them. So you can't make her do things she doesn't want to do, but she will work with you, right? Some of that's male, some of that's female, but also some of it's personality. Again, we're not just like, all right, fine, you're going to do everything I want and just railroading her. We make sure that we invite her into sharing her thoughts. We invite her into sharing what she's wanting. We're trying to foster the best version of her personality. That's a parent's job. Your kids will come out with variation. It's your job to craft the best version of that adult that you're going to be living with.
So good. It sparked another thought, which was, is it possible that nature could help one maybe deal with these challenges differently? If someone, an idea was when, hey, I want to go talk to that person about this thing that feels bad with me. And it's like, if I'm really naturally shy or calm, or it's like maybe your son would be like, I'm gonna go talk to them. I want to talk to them and I want to resolve this problem. Where, maybe, your daughter's like, I think it's okay if we just let it be. And I don't know. That's probably a terrible example, but
No. So the most intense, yes, personality can, but also neurology. So the most intense example of this that I can really share anecdotally, I can't really point to research about this, but I will say a good portion of the clients who come to me either have autistic features or full autism spectrum disorder, very high functioning, very high intelligence. And one thing I have found is that it is very, very, very hard to give a person with autistic features anxious attachment, because they know logically their brain is left shifted into logical areas, right shifted away from emotion. They know logically it's not their fault. And they see very clearly that other people are at fault. So they can develop avoidant attachment features, but often from a very, very hyper logical lens. But it's very hard to give them the belief that they themselves are innately unlovable. They simply don't understand what other people are doing. Now, if you can give them a clear, explicit roadmap of if this, then this, if this, then this, and generalize those skills, parents who can teach that to a hyperlogical child, boom, you have a child who can learn the roadmap of human relationships and follow that roadmap to tremendous success. But if you have a child who grows up in a family where things don't make sense and nobody encourages them, it can buffer them very strongly against those anxious attachment styles. But if you do things wrong, they could lean toward avoidant because they don't think anyone else will ever be reliable.
Wow. So good. I'm all done.
Yeah, this has been a fantastic conversation. Adam, is there anything else you wanted to cover in today's show?
Really, the only thing I want to tell people out there is I remember when I became a parent years back, there was so much pressure to get everything perfect, do everything right, do everything perfect. And if you screw up once, it's like, well, that's it. Kid's dead and ruined for life. And it's all my fault. And I want every parent out there right now listening to know that's absolutely not the case. I haven't really seen too many circumstances of like, we've gone too far, it's unfixable. It is pretty much always fixable. The child usually will respond to you, even in their adult years, quite often. It really, though, is, are you able to go to a place where you fix your attachment first? Can you go to a place where you resolve your trauma first? Can you reach a place where you are capable of calm, reasonable, questioning conversations, even hearing answers you don't necessarily like? Foster secure attachment for yourself first, and then build what we call a self-correcting family system, where even when mistakes get made, your children will come to you and talk to you about it. Hey, Dad, do you remember this one time you said this thing? It really bothered me, and I'd like to resolve it with you. Wow, I'm really sorry to hear that, bud. Okay, yeah, let's talk that through. Here's what I actually meant. Here's how we can make sure this misunderstanding never happens again. And again, I am really sorry that it came across that way. Right? That's how you resolve issues that don't linger for 50 years in your family. And then on your deathbed, they say, did you ever really love me? That's how you get it taken care of when they're like 15. They're like, hey, can we talk about this thing that you said when I was 12? It just kind of resurfaced for me. I kind of need to resolve it really quick. Build a self-correcting family system where you can all come to each other, trusting that everyone will collaborate. Everyone will at least listen. Everyone will work for the best of everybody involved. If you can build that, that's what you need to do as a parent. Not be perfect. Don't put the pressure on to be perfect.
That's really well said. That's beautiful. Thank you for that. Thank you for that encouragement, and thank you for coming on the show today. Please let people know where they can find you.
So I am Adam Lane Smith, the attachment specialist. You can find me on adamlanesmith.com, as one would expect. There I have my coaching. I have courses for people who want to fix their attachment, including the Attachment Bootcamp. I have a mentorship community. I also have right now what I'm offering is called the Attachment Immersion Retreat for a select few people, a very small group of people in Colorado later this year in October. I'll be hosting a retreat there for people who want to come and experience secure attachment if you never have before. So check out my website, adamlanesmith.com, and let's connect.
Awesome. I love it. Thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
I love it. Until next time, Adam.
What was our time?
And with that, Adam Lane Smith has left the virtual chat. And now that I have been properly screened, we can move along with our day happier than we once were.
I gotta say, I do resonate with us having a secure attachment, but I don't think it started out so much that way. And like, even when he was explaining how if you've always been with either a avoidant or maybe anxious people, and then you're with a securely attached person, and because they asked you questions and draw you out, I was like, oh, that was the difference I felt in our relationship when we were first dating, and then when we got married. It's like, no one ever asked me the questions that you would ask me. And still to this day, you ask me, or you'll ask my friends questions, and they'll be like, I need to talk to my therapist about that. Like, that was such a good, deep question. Like, I need to ponder that a little bit. And so something about you, maybe how you were raised.
So do you think you stumbled into a secured attached person?
Yeah, I do. I mean, maybe I had elements of it.
Okay.
But I think, I don't know, something about you is just, I don't think I added to the secure attachment, unless I'm just so chill and wonderful of a wife that just facilitate. No, I'm just kidding. What a good conversation. I hope that, I feel like we hit on so many different things. The parenting element, the spouse relationship, the friendships. What happens if you maybe started out one way? How can you sort of heal or become securely attached? I feel like all those things are attached. So
it feels like a really, with a conversation like that, I just love the tools that I get. This idea of 10 minutes a day, man, that's so doable. I mean, if I can get, a 2-hour run in, I can get 10 minutes of talking to my kid. You know what I'm saying?
And your spouse.
And my spouse.
Give me 10 minutes and give your kids 10 minutes. So that's 40 minutes a day.
Okay. Sounds good. That's so good. I love the tools. I also love some of the like language to help me articulate thoughts and feelings. Some of the stuff that he was saying, he would articulate it so well, it would make a lot more sense. But like, and I don't want to sound prideful here, but I felt like I felt some of that. Man, I feel what he's saying. I've felt that. But him giving me some words to activate on it almost enables me to do a better job kind of dealing with that in the future or approaching it, if you will. So
Totally.
so good. Go check out adamsmith.com. Go hit him up. He's so awesome and friendly and nice, as you would imagine someone that is in this field would be. And man, so thankful he came on today. Definitely a different sort of episode for us, but so thankful we did. I feel like from like a parenting perspective, so valuable. And I hope everybody that's listening to today found it as that way as well.
100%.
Speaking of checking things out, we have some other things you could check out online, that being a shop that we've curated for you, good products that you can trust. ShopTheH.com. If you haven't been to that, if you haven't gone onto ShopTheH.com to find coffee, tea, lard, dish soap, let's just pause there, drop a pin. Lard, dish soap. If you haven't moved your kitchen dish cleaning into solid lard dish soap on your countertop and you're still using the liquid, man, I just feel like you should give it a try. Because it sounds really strange, but it's so incredible, and I'm such a believer. I just can't turn back.
I think we've been using solid soap for like 2 years now, and
At least
I can't go back.
It
to
lasts
liquid.
so long. It's so economical, and it just does such a good job. I love the application of it. I love applying my soap to my brush and then scrubbing my dishes. And then if I need more soap, I can just get some more off the block. I like that. I really
It's
like
never
that.
wasteful. If you're like me, I wash my dishes like with my hands and a cloth, and washing 50, 60, 100 dishes a day, even in the winter, my hands never get dry out because it's not overly harsh on my skin. It's so gentle, and yet it gets even my bacon cast iron clean. I mean, it's cutting through everything, and it's just so bona fide lard and a little bit of coconut oil. And gosh, it's like, take me back to the basics, right? When we used to just make our own soap at home, this is what we would have washed our dishes with. And yeah, it's just one of the many things we sell at
Plus, I'm not
ShopTH.
anxious when I'm using the soap of there being any kind of synthetics in it, scents or like I'm cool to use that soap directly on my cast iron skillet because I know that it's not going to be dropping any weird detergents, chemicals, scents, fragrances, phthalates, BPAs, anything like that into the cast iron skillet. So
yeah, I travel with it, and the pain is like when you go somewhere else and then all of a sudden you smell the dish soap and you're like, whoa, like what are we?
Like, I'm gonna take a drink of this water out of this glass that was run through this, lemon scented detergent, and you're like, what is that?
I know,
it's crazy,
wild.
crazy stuff. Beyond that, we've got all kinds of other stuff on shoptheh.com. Go check it out. We basically are curating all the best things that we love in our house and finding producers so that we can get them to you. So go check that out. Homegrown is a discount code for Homegrown listeners on there. Gives you 10% off. So go check it out. We have books that we've written to help as well. Some that are free. If you're listening to this, you didn't know we had free things on Homegrown, go check those out. So it's homegrowneducation.org. We have a sourdough guide to get you in the sourdough game for free. It's free. We also have a raw dairy guide. You're a little skeptical about this whole raw dairy thing. It sounds weird. It's called raw dairy. That's gross. We have all kinds of episodes about raw dairy on this show. Go check those out. But also go check out the raw dairy guide so you can research for yourself. Check that out. We've also got some for sale resources on there if you want those. Everything from meal plans and guides and recipes and shopping lists to coloring books for your kids to curriculum for your kids to teach them about real food. We'll be restocking those books soon. So be on the lookout for when we restock, because a lot of them are sold out right now. And we do batches of them to help mitigate the costs for you guys and for us. And so be on the lookout for the next restock and get yourself some of those books. If you want to follow us or hear more from us for some reason, you can find us on Instagram. I'm at Joey Hazelmeyer. Elizabeth is at Liz Hazelmeyer, and at homegrown_education. We have a Substack where we share coffee chats These are basically our update conversations that Elizabeth and I do to be better parents, better providers, and better people. And we record them and we put them out on our Substack. You can find that at substack.com/homegrown.
Something like that. Yeah, there's like a search bar. You can put in Homegrown Education.
Homegrown Education Substack, and find us there. You can find the link to that in our in the Homegrown Instagram profile as well. Or just message us if you want it.
Or the show notes.
Message us, get me that Substack and we'll shoot it over to you.
Mm-hmm.
Until next time, friends, that's a wrap.